Welcome to Locked On Lakers for a Friday. It's been well reported that the Lakers front office is interested in signing Christian Wood, but are the Laker players themselves actually on board with it? That and other questions with guests Trevor Lane and Sean Spaces Davis coming up next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, always free, never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can watch the show, interact with tons of Lakers fans in a really active community. Spread the word. We are, I believe, about 100 subscribers away from the 20,000 mark. We really appreciated all the subscribers coming in, with Brian still out of town. Trevor Lane and Sean Spaces Davis from Lakers Nation. Trevor's also the co-host of the Front Office Show with Keith Smith.
Well, thanks for having us, Andy. I appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun. Plenty of stuff to talk for July. There's actually a lot of stuff to talk about going on with the Lakers.
Is there ever really, Sean, an off season for this team? Like, it's off-ish season, maybe like a month or so of the year, but they're like the 7-Eleven of sports. They just don't close.
Maybe the month of August, but like this year you have Anthony Davis extension talks to fill in that first week of August. So never downtime.
Yeah, it just does not end. Want to begin with Christian Wood, and he's big man free agent with the Mavericks, who seem to have no interest in bringing him back, despite actual need for a guy of his skill set. He's, like I said earlier, been linked to the Lakers. Rob Pelinka has been open about wanting to use that 14th spot on another center option, but he is, to put it mildly, Christian Wood, a polarizing player. I spoke with Dan Wojcicki from the LA Times on Thursday's show about his recent Christian Wood article, which included the bonkers quote from an NBA source: "If LeBron James can get him to toe the line, it cements LeBron as the greatest player of all time. That's how hard it is." And this leads me to a recent Lakers Nation podcast, Trevor, where you noted during your time in Vegas for the Summer League, you had heard that some of the players on the Lakers aren't necessarily on board with bringing in Christian Wood. Did you get any gauge on who this could be, or the prestige of the players involved, if nothing else, and just how strong these reservations are, where they come from?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, this is
blink twice if it was LeBron.
this is very much in the sphere of rumors. It was nothing I could confirm from within the Lakers, but it was certainly stuff that was going around that multiple people were discussing, that they had heard that there were players that had gone to Rob and said, "Hey, let's not do this. Let's not go down this path." I did hear who, but again, being that it's so far into the realm of rumors, I didn't want to throw out a name out there and have it land on somebody. But let's just say it's players with influence that were not keen to the idea of adding Christian Wood. And look, I think it makes sense.
So it's not Jalen Hood-Schifino.
It is not JHS. That is safe to say. That's safe to say. But you look at this Lakers team, right? What is it they want to do? They want to contend for a championship. And in order to contend for a championship, you need guys that are going to steal a phrase from Jared Dudley as well as others before him, they're going to be stars in their role. That are guys are going to be just fine getting in and doing exactly what the team needs them to do, even if that means sitting out in some situations. Is Christian Wood the guy that checks that box? Maybe not. And so I can understand why, if you are a Lakers player right now and you're thinking we need to win a championship here and we need everybody pulling in the same direction at the same time, why there might be a little bit of concern with Christian Wood based on what we've seen from him in the past.
Sean, when it comes to entering players like this into a locker room and a dynamic, like, how much do you think chemistry matters? Like chemistry versus talent, particularly with a group like this, where I think it's interesting just because I thought they had really great chemistry down the stretch post trade deadline, really post Rui acquisition. And it seemed like everybody was rowing in the same direction. Like, concerns you would have about possibly that fracturing a bit?
Yeah, I think for one, chemistry is kind of blown out of proportion a ton. It matters certainly, but I think there's definitely times where I think it's just fine. With this specific Lakers group, I have a guess on who the player is. I think you just lean towards just keep the chemistry as it is. And even when you start talking about actual that's not
just speculate. Yeah, I want to make it clear. Trevor did not blink twice.
I did not.
This was just me screwing around having fun.
All seriousness, I think when you start talking about just the players on this roster in general in terms of on-court fit as well, I think one of the problems you're going to run into that you already have, which is a good one nonetheless, is Christian Wood's going to be a 4-5. You could argue there's some 5 minutes available, and I think there's been some stuff about them wanting AD to play next to another big more often. But, I mean, if you have Christian Wood at the 4 a ton, which will likely be the case next to Anthony Davis, there's so many guys he's going to be competing with on a night-to-night basis for those 4 minutes. So, like Trevor said, is Christian Wood a type of guy that can handle missing 3 games in a row and coming back for that 4th one? That's to be determined.
Yeah, it's funny, that quote that from Dan Wojcicki's piece about, if LeBron could get Christian Wood to buy in, it would cement him as the greatest player of all time. We know that LeBron is capable of creating culture, and he's one of the best players in the league, and he is great at getting guys to buy in. We heard a lot about how, he really helped with Rui Hachimura, for example. It was more Rui, I think, wanting to learn from LeBron, but nonetheless, I think LeBron was helpful in those regards. But I can't put myself in LeBron's headspace because I've never been close to as good at, anything as he is at basketball. But if I'm him at age 39 in my 21st season, the idea of just trying to get Christian Wood in line and like having that as a project, that just sounds like a drag to me. Like, that doesn't seem like something I would be interested in, knowing that my time with a contender with the Lakers, if nothing else, it's certainly a smaller window. I don't think I'd want to be bothering with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to have to. He wouldn't want to have to hold his hand through this whole situation. You don't want to have to do that while you're trying to, manage yourself and make sure that you are at your best come postseason, and that means win enough games and all of that. You don't want to have to try to hold somebody's hand through the season, and that's why I contend that, because that's kind of what's out there about Christian Wood. Like, that's the perception of him. I think as much as we look and we say, oh my gosh, who are the Lakers going to get? Who's this other big going to be? Christian Wood's probably the best guy out there. They really need him. Maybe, but I think Christian Wood needs the Lakers. I think Christian Wood needs the Lakers probably more than they need him, because if he's able to turn things around in LA, we've seen what that can do. We saw what happened with Malik Monk. We saw what happened with Dennis Schroeder. That was the path to much bigger contracts in the future. And so I think there's, even with players telling Rob, like, hey, this isn't the guy that we want to go after, the Lakers may very well still do. That's what I heard as well, was that Rob might do it anyway because of the value that he would present, especially on a veteran minimum. And so if they go ahead and go down this path, the opportunity is there for Christian Wood. But like you said, some of the veterans on this team, they're not going to want to hold his hand. But that's also the brilliance of a veteran minimum contract. You don't have to. If it doesn't work out, very easy to move on from that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess at this stage of free agency, there could be an opportunity cost in terms of who you could have signed instead of him, but the opportunity costs aren't that high because there aren't that many guys left. Sean, before we go to the break, if you were looking at filling this spot, Christian Wood, like Trevor said, is, I think, the most talented option out there just in terms of pure talent. Would you be erring towards the side of best talent available? Or would you be thinking more like fit, maybe specific skill set with fit, something like that?
I think I'm just going best talent available, honestly, because it is a veteran minimum, to where I think Bismack Biyombo, what he is, for an example, right? But I think with Christian Wood, he's realistically, in terms of what he provides for you, he's probably an $8 million player, all things considered, just like what he provides on the offensive side of the ball, especially where he's a good roller, great pick and pop there, which can really open up the Lakers offense. So there's even an argument to be said that he can be a good fit while being the best talent available. But so yeah, like $8 million player potentially on a veteran minimum. I think you would probably just have to go best player available. 14th roster spot too. Just go ahead.
Well, I suspect we're going to be on Christian Wood watch for a little bit longer, if for no other reason that none of us are destined to ever get a break. Coming up next, I want to talk with you guys a little bit about the starting five and by extension, the rotation for this team moving forward, because I think some of it is set in stone, but there's one place in particular where I think the Lakers could go in different directions. I want to get your opinion about that, so we will talk about that next. And Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you will land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And you can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to whoever you think will hit the first home run in a game. And if you're looking ahead, FanDuel has odds on the MVP, the Cy Young, World Series winner, and for Laker fans who also happen to love the blue, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Clayton Kershaw, and the Dodgers are respectively among the leaders in those categories. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, really easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. And there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you get $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so looking ahead to next season and the rotation, I think three guys are set in stone: LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Austin Reaves in that starting lineup. And I think short of an absolutely disastrous training camp from D'Angelo Russell or Darvin Ham just deciding he'd prefer D'Lo's scoring punch off the bench in a really big role, I think D'Lo is more or less a lock. But then it goes to the fifth spot, which feels to me legitimately in flux between Rui Hachimura, Jarred Vanderbilt, Taurean Prince, potentially Jackson Hayes, or 14th spot center TBD, although that one feels less likely to me. It's obviously early, lots still to sort out. But when you guys think about the rotation and the starting lineup, first Trevor, then Sean, is there any particular direction you're leaning in, or your preferences?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I follow the money on this, and I say there's 17 million reasons why it should be Rui Hachimura, that he should be the guy to get that look. I don't think that's going to be the ultimate determining factor. I think that if Vando is the best fit, then Jarred Vanderbilt it will be. But I do think that Rui is going to be the favorite going into the season, and then we'll see if something changes. As we get into preseason, we get into, of course, training camp first and see what happens there. And namely, can Jarred Vanderbilt hit a corner three? I think if Jarred Vanderbilt can hit a corner three at just a respectable rate, so teams have to actually defend him out there, then he will wind up getting that starting nod, because I think he does all the other little things that you need guys to do when they're playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If that corner three doesn't come around, then I think Rui Hachimura made enough improvement on the defensive end of the floor. He closed the gap with Jarred Vanderbilt somewhat. He's not the same level of defender, but he made improvements there to where it would be enough to where you can put him out there, because he is such a better offensive player than Jarred Vanderbilt is if that corner three isn't falling for Vando. So I think that will be the ultimate determining factor. But if I had to pick somebody right now, I think it's going to be Rui.
I've been on the side of you start Vando as of right now, because I think Vando gives you something that you don't have in that starting lineup defensively, and that's a legitimate point of it, like a really good point of attack defender. Where Rui, I think there's a lot of skill set duplication, especially with like LeBron defensively, where like they're both probably used best as low activity or just weak side help defenders that can help off of bad shooters, etc. And I just don't think you need another one of those guys in the starting lineup, because D'Lo's already a low activity guy, where he's not going to be guarding, one of the better players on the floor. Austin, I think the narrative on Austin Reaves right now is that he's a bad defender, which I just don't think is true. But even then, he's not a good one. He's probably a little bit above average. Bron, like I just said, he's probably a neutral defender, but that really is the playoff run. I think regular season LeBron will be what we've seen in the past. And Anthony Davis is the best defender on the planet, but you need a legitimate perimeter stopper, and I think that's Vando. And then I'm going to be more optimistic and pray that Darvin Ham utilizes Vando a lot better offensively, whether it's just literally, if you watch a Golden State Warriors game, you cannot help off a Draymond Green, because if you do, it's okay, we're just going to find Draymond and we're just going to go chase DHO with Steph or Clay, wide open three. Utilize him more in that way. I think Vando has some playmaking abilities out of short rolls. Use him in that way. So I'm going to go with just start Vando. Ruby's going to play more minutes anyway, so just start Vando.
Okay, before I even get into my thoughts on this, a couple things, Sean, jumped out at me. First of all, like with Vanderbilt and his offense, like when you look at what happened in Denver and him eventually falling out of the rotation, seeming unplayable, I don't disagree with what Darvin did in terms of reducing those minutes, because it felt like he had to. But it felt to me like the real problem when it came to Vanderbilt being quote unquote unplayable was more that the other guys weren't hitting their shots, as opposed to Vanderbilt himself being unplayable offensively, because his job isn't necessarily hit those shots. It's more of a bonus. Like his job was to do the things I think he was doing, but the problem became, and it's not completely this simple, but I think a big part of the issue was D'Lo wasn't hitting jump shots. Dennis Schroeder wasn't hitting jump shots. Lonnie Walker, game 4 against Golden State notwithstanding, was not really hitting jumpers either. Even LeBron was not hitting as many jump shots as he needed. And that started messing the spacing and just the general offensive issues, to where Vanderbilt became less of somebody you could put on the floor. So I just think the way he's been talked about in a lot of ways, I don't think is totally accurate. You guys can agree, disagree on that, sort of agree, whatever. But I guess your reaction to that. But I think that's been a big thing with Vanderbilt that I think requires some reexamination.
I think that's fair to a degree. That, look, Jarred Vanderbilt, he's not a guy where you anticipate him to go out there and put up 15 points on any given night. I do think just in terms of floor spacing and keeping some of the burden off of Anthony Davis, because we saw it, right? Teams would just swarm AD in the paint, do everything they could to stop him. And there's no release valve there. If Vanderbilt is out behind the 3-point line, the teams don't have to worry about him. I mean, we talked about this a ton with Russell Westbrook earlier in the year about why his lack of shooting was such a big deal. So I don't think that Vanderbilt has to be this go-to scorer for you in order to be successful. Yes, if D'Lo is shooting 40+% from three, if Reaves is doing it too, if LeBron's doing his thing, then yeah, that mitigates your offensive issues with Vanderbilt to some degree. But still, to get to where you ultimately want to go, to really get your offense to the level that you need it to be at, you need him to at least be some kind of a threat with that perimeter shot, or just be so good, at the basket, be such a blunt force battering ram at the rim that he makes up for it that way. But his hands haven't been great at the basket either. I'm coming off as though I hate Jarred Vanderbilt. I love Jarred Vanderbilt. He's fantastic. I think that the key is getting that corner, which he only shoots corner threes. If you look at his numbers, the key is to get Jarred Vanderbilt just to knock that in, because that opens up so much else. When we talk about getting D'Lo's open looks, and especially AD looks in the paint, it's going to come down to having somebody out there that can put the ball in the basket, or at least be a threat to do so. And also, I think that's going to be the key for Jarred Vanderbilt to get paid next year. He has millions of dollars on the line that will very well come down to whether or not teams have to defend him on the offensive end.
Well, first, I agree with that graphic. Boo Trevor, always boo Trevor. When you get the opportunity. Absolutely. I agree with part of your take, Andy. I disagree with another part of it. I agree with the sense that I think Vando is being improperly evaluated, especially for like grand scale, whether it's Lakers media or national media in general. I think because there's a large, section, shockingly, that thinks Vando is the either world's defensively top 10 defender, which I'll take a step back on that from. And I guess I'm the Vando hater here and say that's not the case, because to me, like, I think Jarred Vanderbilt, there's a difference between him and like Jaden McDaniels, for example, where Jaden McDaniels does everything Jarred Vanderbilt does well in terms of perimeter isolation, while also being one of the best screen navigators in the NBA, which just opens up his ability as an on-ball defender, which I think is the biggest weakness defensively of Vando. But I'm saying that, and Vando is still a really, really good defender. I just think that's something he has to improve upon. And if Vando does do that, you're looking at a top 10 perimeter defender. But also, I think there's a lot of people that are increasingly negative about Vando, especially more offensively, where, like I tried to detail a few minutes ago, I think I'm more optimistic, because I think even if Jarred Vanderbilt shoots, I'll go below 33% from three. I think he's an all right passer to where you can have him in short roll situations. I think you could just put him in the Draymond Green role off ball to where you're like, just let him go screen for dudes. It's not that complicated.
Or remember in the regular season for a while, he was doing a great job using his lack of gravity like as a weapon because he was getting ignored so much. He kept just cutting, and that stopped happening. And I think that was also in part because other guys aren't missing shots, so it was just easier to sag off everyone in general. And some of the back cutting lanes weren't available, and just there was more attention being paid on other guys, which made it easier for Vanderbilt to do that. But it felt like he wasn't being utilized that way at all as the playoffs went along, and that felt like something for a while. I was like, damn, he's really smart about the way he cuts.
Yeah, he's a very sneaky player. When he would get along the baseline there, people would be ignoring him, and the next thing you know, he's got a dunk. So he's done some things to help deal with that lack of shooting. And then the question is, can the Lakers keep him in that starting five and still open things up for AD? Because that's ultimately, right, that's what has to happen here. As much as we can talk about Jarred Vanderbilt and Rui and all these guys, it's what's going to get you a dominant version of Anthony Davis night in and night out, because that's going to determine how far the Lakers ultimately go. And I think that opening up the paint as much as possible for him is going to be important. And Vanderbilt can do that a little bit with the sneaky stuff along the baseline. But again, I think he's got to get the shooting going. I think Sean makes a great point, though, defensively. As far as the screen navigation goes, he gets there. Then he's really going to be a top flight defender in the NBA.
All right, coming up, I want to add my 2 cents on this fifth spot in flux, and then I want to get to a stat that Sean recently tweeted about involving the Denver Nuggets and potentially by extension the Lakers. So we will get to that next. All right, so the more I've been thinking about this with that fifth spot, I've been wondering if Rui would actually be utilized better off the bench, just in the sense that he could become more of an offensive focal point, and you can still find 30-ish minutes for him. I wonder if you actually get more for your money with Rui as a feature, like the focal point of that second unit, as opposed to there's going to be a cap on the amount of shots he's going to get with the first five. And then you open up the opportunity for either Jarred Vanderbilt or Taurean Prince to have a more specific lane to be used, because role players like them, I think you get the most out of them when their roles are most strictly defined and there's less for them to do outside of their lane. And I feel like you might actually just open up more opportunity for Prince or Vanderbilt in that starting five to shine a little bit more while still getting an awful lot out of Rui overall.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that if you are going to go that route, that's the benefit, right? If you do send Rui off the bench, then you're able to say, hey, again, I can't believe I'm bringing it up twice in the show here, but it's kind of like the idea with Russell Westbrook, right? Where you say, hey, you know what? It's not really fitting with the starters, but you get all the shots you want with the bench unit. Go do your thing.
And comparatively, like $17 million off the bench after you just did 43, like that's a bargain.
It's a breath of fresh air. It's like, what a weight off our shoulder.
Yeah, it's 2.5 times less than what you were paying Russ to come off the bench. So it's the Lakers trending in the right direction, if nothing else.
Now, is there any chance, though, that it actually winds up being Jackson Hayes? I mean, Rob Pelinka was talking about that, about how he wants to play Hayes next to AD, and they want to, do all this stuff. I think there's just too much ulterior motive, and there's too much incentive for him to say Jackson Hayes is going to play next to AD, even if that's not the plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously there could be an element of salesmanship to Christian Wood or Bismack Biyombo or whoever they could be recruiting.
Or AD, hey, sign this contract extension. We're definitely going to play another big next to you.
There can be an element of telling AD what he wants to hear. I just feel like it feels to me, I'd be curious what both of you guys think, but kind of a non-starter, just in the sense that you're by definition putting LeBron at the 3 defensively, and that to me just feels untenable. So unless you're finding a 4 that can do all the things, or a center, depending on how you're defining this guy, a 4/5 who can do all the things that you want for AD, but also play the role defensively that you wouldn't want LeBron to play, in which case I don't understand how this guy's available for a veteran's minimum, whoever the hell he is.
Yeah. No, I'm in full agreement. I don't think they do it. I don't think they ultimately. I think maybe you get some spot minutes here and there with Jackson Hayes and AD on the floor at the same time, but otherwise, I don't. Aside from putting the message out there, hey Christian Wood, there's minutes here next to AD, or hey AD, we're going to play another center with you, so you don't have to do it. Remember Dwight and JaVale, how great that was. We're going to do that again. Aside from that kind of stuff, that kind of spin, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. At least not in the starting lineup.
I mean, Sean, you're better at X's and O's than I am. Is there something I'm missing?
No, the consensus that look, the thing with AD at the 5 or at the 4 is AD is probably at his best when he is the 4, but I think the data and the film probably show that the Lakers in Anthony Davis is now close to 5 year, 10 years a Laker. They've always been better with him as the 5. Like even if you go back to the title season, regular season turns like plus minus like above per 100 possessions or whatever. Regular season was like both +6. Playoffs, it was like +5 AD at the 4, +12 him at the 5. Next year, same thing. It was a lot more drastic. In the playoffs, AD at the 4, it's like a +4 maybe. Still okay, but AD at the 5 in that playoff series, which very limited sample size, it's like a +16. The Lakers have been the far better team when he's at the 5. It sucks because AD's probably better at the 4, but I think, long story short, I'm praying that they're not putting Jackson Hayes in the starting lineup next to AD.
Yeah, again, a lot of this too has to do with LeBron. Like I think actually a lot with AD in general, like the way he gets discussed, especially when it comes to people criticizing AD or thinking AD doesn't do enough. There could be some validity to it, but I think people sometimes forget how much of AD's performance, his success, what he brings to the team is directly linked to what you need to give LeBron now at this stage of his career. Because some things, like in a perfect world, you would do with AD, you can't do right now because of where LeBron is in his career, and that you just can't work around it.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's going to be key too. It's what defensive matchups can you give LeBron, and how limited are you if you try to put those guys together? There's a domino effect across the roster, and I think you're spot on with that, Andy.
Apologies, our dog Bobo barking in the background. Something's upsetting him, and what are you gonna do?
Jackson Hayes in the starting 5 is upsetting him.
Obviously,
he's not a fan of this either. Bobo just feels just like I do. You can't make that work. All right, Sean. A couple days ago, you tweeted out at Sean_DAVISEAN for those looking to spell Sean. Something interesting. The correct way to spell it. Something interesting when you look at NBA champions since 2003. Here's every championships team's defensive rating the year they won. With the Jokic Nuggets being an outlier, you need a top 12 defense to win a championship. The Nuggets were 15th in 2023 when they won. And then you noted, like, going back, 92, 93?
90 in general.
90 in general. The only other exception was the 2001 Lakers, which you astutely noted. They had Kobe, Shaq, which
they're pretty all right.
Yeah, those two guys can paper over a lot of whatever other issues are there. This jumped out at me. I was curious what you think in terms of, do you think this data makes Denver less likely or even close to impossible to repeat, or going really battling uphill to repeat? And if that's the case, does that make the West just truly wide open? Because most people see the West as Denver right now and just a cluster of everyone else.
I think it's a weird combination of a bit of everything, where I'm like, Denver has the best player on the planet in Nikola Jokic, who I don't really think you can stop. He's just one of those pray he misses type of players. And unfortunately for us, he didn't miss at all, it felt like, in that
he didn't.
Conference finals. So I think he can kind of blanket over a lot of issues, right? Like 15th isn't bad. It's just right middle of the pack. But I think there is going to be, to a certain extent, more of an uphill climb. You're losing Bruce Brown, who I think is going to be a big loss. I think Nuggets fans and the Nuggets themselves would argue we have Christian Brown, and he's going to step in and fill that void that Bruce Brown's leaving. But I think the West in general got a lot better. So, I think the Lakers got better at the end of the day. I'm a lot lower on the Suns, which is the point of that tweet in general. You tell me the Suns will have a top 12 defense. Okay, I get you. I just don't think that's the case. But Phoenix, LA, I like Golden State still. They still have that dude in number 30 who's pretty good at basketball. The Clippers, they stay healthy. The Kings got better, I thought. Memphis when jogging. Like, there's 10 teams legitimately in the West I think are all competing and maybe in that second tier. So I think Denver is the best team. I think they do probably stand alone right now. I think it's a lot closer than it was last year because of the talent they lost and just how much better the rest of the Western Conference got.
Trevor, when you look at the West right now, because I mean, at this point, other than what potentially happens, I guess, with the Clippers and James Harden, assuming that's where he ends up going, if he ends up going anywhere at all, like where do you see the Lakers in terms of this spectrum in the West, and how much separation do you think there is between them and whoever you consider at the top, and them and whoever you consider behind them?
I think it's very little separation across the Western Conference. And this is what the NBA wants, right? I mean, this is the parity they've been talking about. This is the goal of the new CBA. I think they got a real taste of parity this last season in a Western Conference that had teams competing all the way through to the final weeks. We had teams jumping up and down in the standings in the West with one win or one loss. And that's ultimately what they want. And this is going to be, I think that factor is going to come in even more so this coming season with the West. Because you look at the teams that are in the Western Conference that last year would have been, well, should have been maybe, except for if they're playing the Lakers, an easy win like the Houston Rockets. Well, they added pieces. They had Fred VanVleet. They had, well, all right, I don't know how much Dylan Brooks helps them, but nonetheless, they add some pieces. San Antonio gets that Wembanyama guy. So not that these are going to be playoff teams, but some of the teams that you were chalking up as W's on your schedule are now teams that are a little bit more difficult to beat. I think the West is going to cannibalize itself. We're going to see a lot of teams kind of settle around the middle in terms of their record, but so many teams are so close. And yeah, Denver won the championship, but what, 5 years in a row now we've had a different champion? So I don't think that they are going to run away with the Western Conference. I think it's going to be very, very close. And I think we're going to have, once again, 3 teams at least not even make the play-in that could be playoff caliber teams in the Western Conference. So as far as where the Lakers are, I'm hoping they're in the top 4 in the Western Conference, but it's all so close that I think ultimately health is going to determine how everything falls.
Yeah, it's been that way for the Lakers for like the last 4-5 years, really the entire LeBron era, as one would expect at this stage of his career. Trevor Lane and Sean Davis. Trevor Lane, you can follow on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. You can follow Sean on Twitter at Sean SEAN_DAVI. Trevor's also the co-host of the Front Office Show with Keith Smith. And guys, this was awesome, man. I know, again, a lot of our listeners, our viewers, really wanted the Lakers Nation to be represented on this show. So really appreciate you guys making the time, man. This was great.
Well, thank you so much for having us. This was a blast.
Thanks for having us, man. This was really fun, and hope we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Open invite whenever you guys want. Coming up on Monday, I should have the ultimate scouting report on Cam Reddish. Going to be talking to hosts from Locked On Knicks, Locked On Hawks, and Locked On Blazers to get just the complete look at Cam Reddish's entire career leading up to the Lakers. And then Brian's going to be back in town. The show will continue onward. Until then, everybody enjoy their weekend. Later.